And to that nature, I wanted to turn over for a few minutes to Dr. Lawhorn, a founding member of AAM and I believe CMO of a hospital and head of a true democratic group, very few of those left, just to give an idea of what things can look like for patients and physicians when it's done the right way, which is exceedingly rare right now, but it's a little bit of a pinnacle of what we'd like to get back to, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitch. Can you hear me okay? Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, good, good. Appreciate it, Mitch. The last couple of lectures this afternoon have been absolutely fascinating. And what I have to say, I can probably keep fairly short and a bit of fluff here. I finally reached the point where I think I'm successfully navigating some retirement now. So a lot of my thoughts and experiences of wisdom are from the past. Let's see if I can share a screen here. Desktop one. I'm going to try this anyway. Screen recording, media. Let me go back, try again. Screen, desktop. Share. Privacy. Well, I thought I was going to be there, so sorry about that. Recording. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me just skip through and just kind of go over some of the things that some of my comments here. Just talking about independent emergency medicine groups, there are still some around. I've been fairly familiar with a few in Middle Tennessee, where I spent most of my career, and just wanted to comment on what the model looks like. I know there are a lot of you out there that have an interest, but just have no idea on how to get started, especially those of you who are young in the industry now and coming out, where all your only options seem to be being employed or being part of a contract management group. First of all, a typical group may, first of all, look like an emergency medicine, all board certified physicians. This is what a typical private independent group looks like. The physicians also are most likely to have specifically trained for 3 or 4 years in an emergency medicine specific residency program. There are some good independent groups that have folks that trained in other specialties that grandfathered in, who've simply been doing emergency medicine for decades now. But that is fading away, I think, with my generation, and especially now that we have so many good young physicians who have gone through emergency medicine residency programs. A group would typically also have an extremely well-defined use of closely supervised extenders, such as nurse practitioners or PAs, if they utilize them at all. And there are some parameters that they may have in place for those types of groups. Typically, in an independent emergency medicine group, most all the physicians live right in the community or in very nearby communities, as compared with a lot of the programs that are run by big contract management companies. Often when they go in, like a Team Health or MCare and Vision, whoever, to take over a new program, they meet with the CEO of the hospital or hospital system. Their answer is always yes to everything. We can solve all those problems. And yes, we can have physicians here and up and working in the next 60 days, which is almost impossible unless you are a big group and you have tiers of backup physicians that you're willing to pay $500 or $600 an hour to fly in for the first month, 2, 3, 6 months, or even year to keep them in place. while you're trying to do your recruiting. And typically the independent practices find it really difficult to compete with that aspect of the contract management groups. In my experience, the doctors in an independent group are often close friends who have chosen to become equal partners in providing emergency care to the community in which they serve and they live. Often the groups may start out of the same sort of training program and may come into an opportunity that's close to where they trained. And this happened to me in Middle Tennessee when I trained with some just incredibly bright, talented people in the early days of the Vanderbilt program. And we were able to merge into a community in Gallatin, Tennessee, just northeast of Nashville, and form one of the best, what I consider one of the best groups in the country. The doctors in an independent group, because it now is their business, they will typically self-select the best physicians from the best training programs. And I've quit saying in the country, I'll say in the world, because the best training programs in the world are in the United States here. And there are some absolutely incredible programs here. Each of these independent groups also, as compared with the contract management companies, they control their own coding and billing of patients that they see and they treat. And either they contract with an emergency medicine specific billing and coding company, and there are several of those really good ones, really solid companies in the United States. And the parameters of that contract are controlled by the emergency medicine group, not by the coding and billing company like you get with the contract management companies. Or like at least one or two other groups that I know of, they develop their own internal coding and billing department. And those types of EM independent groups that I know of like that are typically notably bigger and have been doing this for a long time and have developed their own internal expertise to be able to do this in order to control their coding and billing. There are a couple of examples that I'll just throw out that I'm aware of. One was part of a group that I helped form many years ago at Sumner Regional Medical Center in Gallatin, Tennessee. It has survived for, gosh, getting close to 20 years now, which is rather amazing in that it has been a part of the LifePoint health systems. And the other group that I'm aware of, just from being from the area, is Arthur Smolinski's group there in Middle Tennessee Emergency Physicians. They're actually a notably bigger group in private practice and are affiliated now with, I believe, training programs with the University of Tennessee, and they've had a really good model. The actual models of the way the reimbursements are set up between Sumner Regional and Middle Tennessee are a little bit different, but just are examples of showing how different groups can set up truly democratic and independent groups somewhat differently. At Sumner Regional, for example, I know that all the partners now and early on, most of us initially trained at the Vanderbilt program, but then we quickly brought on people from Johns Hopkins, Harvard Brigham Young program, Stanford, and other top programs. One of the reasons that the group has survived for this many years is that one of the great ER physicians there who took over the sort of the business director role when I left has now also become the chief medical officer of the hospital and has been very involved with administrative duties at the hospital. Less than half. In fact, I think I saw a statistic maybe down in the, getting close to single digits of the emergency departments in the United States today are staffed by independent medical physician groups, but there are still some around that are doing very well. The remainder, as you well know, are staffed by party contract management companies, or they are nowadays increasingly just staffed by physicians who are employed directly by the hospital. And again, just to repeat what's been being said all day, the venture capital firms or private equity groups, they're focused on making maximum profit from the misfortune of those that are in need of emergency care. Thus, when you have a venture capital firm that is running an emergency department, the patients are charged higher fees. The coding and billing is not set by the physicians, it's set by the company. And oftentimes there are lawsuits or major efforts to go after every patient who doesn't pay their bill. That doesn't typically happen in the independent groups because they don't really have to if things are set up correctly. And it's very easy for the doctor, business director to say, no, we're going to write this one off, or no, we're going to help this family do this or that. Also, under the venture capital firms, as you well know, doctors are typically paid less. Most doctors don't even know how much less, especially the generation out today. But it is a significant chunk of money. Dr. McNamara, through the years, have said it may be $50,000 a year for just having really somebody make out a schedule and be your secretary. I would say nowadays it's probably getting closer to $100,000 a year that young physicians are giving up compared to being able to work and do their own coding and billing in a private independent group. In the venture capital groups, like I mentioned too, the providers are very often from outside the community, and oftentimes when they do take over an emergency department with a hospital system somewhere, they are bringing in kind of the hired guns, the paid people that are on their payrolls strictly to go fill in the shifts, and they may be there for a year, and unbeknownst to a lot of the other doctors, they're probably making $500 an hour, $600 an hour during that entire time. The contract management companies make up that difference in their contracts with the hospital in getting reimbursed for some costs. And they also hopefully make up that difference by being able to go back to their shareholders and say, oh, well, we've got this many new contracts in the past year, and therefore the stock value and price continues to go up, and they recoup some of their investment. So they're not just completely throwing money away when you do this. They have a longer term plan that is not an option for independent practice groups. The other thing that's been going on, I can recall since the late 90s, going to a meeting at one of the team health headquarters in Knoxville, where they were preaching the same story that they're saying now, trying to convince the directors of the EDs to use nurse practitioners or PAs more and more and more, as much as they can, any type of extender to increase their profits. The independent emergency physician groups, it's been said, and actually there's been published information about how they provide more charity care to patients in the United States by probably a factor of 5 to 6 times than any other type of physician in the United States. Years ago, I recall talking with Andy Walker about this, and I think the figure that sticks in my head, the average annual contribution by any average emergency physician was probably $140,000 a year worth of free care. So how does the care and quality of independent physician groups stack up against the private equity-run hospitals? Well, it's generally it's less costly to the patients and the healthcare system at large. It's more efficient, and there's better targeted patient care. The independent groups don't necessarily feel the pressure to order unnecessary tests, and usually have very good relationships with other docs in the hospital to help take care of those patients. And maybe biggest of all, the physicians typically in those groups are part of the community. They live in the community. Their kids play Little League ball with everybody else in the community. They go to the churches, and they are invested. They're not just punching the clock and then hopping on a plane and going back to another part of the country. Just in regards to the Sumner Regional Hospital, They've been owned by LifePoint, and LifePoint, we could talk a long time about this, but I'll just say now that there's a fellow named Leif Murphy, who's the former executive vice president and chief financial officer for LifePoint. And guess what? He's now the CEO of Team Health. They formed a business arrangement resulting in almost all their Delta Division hospitals years ago having almost all of their emergency departments staffed by Team Health. There were probably at that time somewhere in the range of 70 hospitals, all of them except one. That one hospital was the emergency physicians at Sumner Regional in Gallatin, Tennessee. And that particular private group was the one that LifePoint, year after year after year after year, held up to all the other hospitals that they were going in looking to buy and take over as their standard of ER group. Now, that obviously wasn't completely true, but at least they were recognizing that this group of very special emergency medicine colleagues year after year won their highest awards and accolades within the LifePoint system for being their premier emergency department physician group. And this is, like I say, this has been going on for almost 20 years now. I'm going to kind of stop right there for any questions. I'll just say, throw this out there. There is a very small book that is way overdue to be upgraded that's available through AAEM. And it's basically a real simple little guide to getting started in your own emergency department practice. And there are some nuances, like I say, that need to be updated, but it's at least a starting point. And on that note, I'm gonna kind of stop here and see if there's any questions out there from anybody, and see if we can move on to the next.
Thanks, Dr. Lawhorn. I really think that we've had some conversations, and you mentioned renegotiating the agreement with LifePoint, and that you're holding out because you've got such great you have such great relationships with the staff and the administration there, but this might be the last round of it. So we're really looking to see how we can get this next generation to swing that pendulum back. Leah Houston asks you to drop the link of that book or link in there. I'm going to move us along right now, but I'm also going to mention a couple things. So we're going to compress the panel and town hall, because really I think that can fit within that hour for what does ACEP need to do. We'll start that in around about 30 minutes. And we will have Mo Kasich come back in and do the rest of her talk, leading right up into our cocktail hour, which is really supposed to start at 5:30. And we can all join back in there, and you guys will, I think it'll be kind of cool. If you want to talk to Dr. Lawhorn and anyone else, have conversations, you can move your little avatar around there here and see each other that way. So